Us presento a la Marilyn, vida, és directora de Energy Action Project. És una especialista en comunicació científica amb més de 20 anys d'experiència presentant notícies i informació tècnica, científica i econòmica a audiències no especialitzades. I pensant i identificant la pobresa energètica, va concebre aquesta idea, aquest projecte, Energy Action Project, una nova forma de divulgar que utilitza una plataforma multimèdia per informar i empoderar l'audiència. Sense més, us deixo amb ella.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation to come and to wrap up what's been a very interesting first day of this event. Sorry that I don't speak Spanish or Catalan, but I do want to give a nod to the translators, because as I've noticed today, Spanish people speak very, very quickly, or Catalan people speak very quickly, and the translators have managed to speak in English at a rate I've never heard anybody speak English. So I'm a little bit worried that you're going to find me quite dull as I speak in a sort of slower rate as we go through this. But I am here to tell you that we're doing some very interesting work in relation to the work that you are all doing. Today we've heard a lot of very interesting stories about people living in energy poverty, and a lot of extremely important stories about the kinds of work that different agencies and organizations and policymakers and technology people are doing to address energy poverty. One of the things I often ask at an event like this is how many of you have been successful in getting media attention to the work that you're doing. And I was super impressed this morning to see how much media came to this event and to see that this is clearly on the media agenda in Spain. So congratulations to all of you for making this a social issue that gets a lot of coverage. So the Energy Action Project is, as the title says, we're creating a space for the energy story. Not only where the small stories that we keep hearing at different events like this can come together, but where they can be mapped in a way that allows us to tell the big story. ENACT is really looking at addressing two social challenges related to energy. The first one is that there's very high levels of energy poverty in different parts of the world, and the second one is that there's very low levels of energy literacy. So according to the International Energy Agency, almost half of the people in the world live in some type of energy poverty. About 3 billion people live in what the IEA would call inadequate energy situations. That means they have absolutely no access to any modern form of energy, particularly in developing countries. About 600 million live in what the IEA would call unreliable energy situations. So there is an energy system in place, but there's a lot of blackouts and load shedding and those kinds of things, so they're not able to access their energy all the time. The situation in Europe and North America is what the IEA would refer to more as being unaffordable energy, where there's sufficient energy available, but individuals cannot afford enough of it to support their own health and well-being. So the second challenge that we're looking at is this low level of energy literacy. In the United States, a few years ago, a survey was done, just a small energy literacy test, with 18 questions, and only 12% of people were able to correctly answer half of the questions. So this idea that it's been discussed a lot today, how much do people know about energy poverty? We also have to say, how much do they know about energy and the energy that they use? I was recently told another statistic, I don't have the source for it yet, but it said that on average, a person spends 10 minutes a year thinking about energy. So we clearly have a big challenge in terms of the energy literacy stake. So ENACT is looking to address both of those issues, or at least to play some role in both of those issues. Our tagline, reporting that seeks to empower, reflects our dual aim. First of all, we want to raise awareness of action to improve access to energy. And the second is we want to share content that helps people who are affected by energy poverty, and also people who are working on energy poverty, to make more informed decisions on a whole bunch of different levels and in the vast range of topics that have been covered today. So we realized that if you want to empower people, there's a few things you have to do first. You first have to engage them in the energy story, which is a challenge on its own. Then, given the low level of energy literacy that I mentioned, we have to find ways to inform them about some very basic concepts of energy, and we have to explain some of the aspects that are much more complex. So how do we do that? This is where we do our multimedia reporting. We feel that this creates a mechanism to draw new audiences to content that makes the connection between people and energy. It can also provide a means of making all of the important stuff between there, technology, policy, economics, financing, social and cultural issues. It can make all of those things both interesting and relevant to the people and the energy that they need to have a healthy health and well-being. So Cold at Home is our chapter of ENACET that deals specifically with the energy poverty situation that is unaffordable energy, primarily in Europe and North America. So I'm going to walk you through some of the content on our site to show you how we use these little bits of information to build up the big picture of the unaffordable energy chapter. And first, let's go to Ukraine, where Katya, a 69-year-old pensioner, is living year-round in her summer dacha, about an hour and a half out of Kiev. So it's not the suburbs, but it's not rural Ukraine. The house has a single gas feed, but there's no distribution heat system for the heat in the house. So she spends a lot of time leaning on this wall, which helps soothe her arthritis. But it's more than health impacts that she feels because of her energy poverty. So we're just going to listen to a little. I think maybe my video is not working. Oh. There was no sound other than just music, so I think you got the story. So personal stories like this are our way to engage audiences, including people who normally wouldn't follow energy news in the energy story. Certainly you wouldn't want your grandmother to be living in the situation that Katya is in. And in fact, we delved into Katya's situation in a 10-minute documentary film on the Cold at Home website. So that little snippet is one of our social media tools to draw people to the website. What's important is that attached to that very personal story about her and her family that we show in the video is the inform and explain part of what we do. So we looked at why did energy prices go up in 280%. So as you all know, Ukraine is the transit country for oil and gas coming from Russia into Europe. And Ukraine has used the revenue that they get from that to, one of the ways they've shared the wealth of that is to have very, very low energy prices, gas prices in the country. In 2014, the economy was very bad, the war in Donetsk was on, and the government of Ukraine went to the International Monetary Fund for a loan. Well, the loan, the IMF said, we'll give you a loan as long as you get rid of your gas subsidies. So the IMF was really, in a way, pushing the Ukraine government to correct its energy pricing policy, which had been ineffective for many decades. But the other thing that was happening because of those energy subsidies was people were not using energy efficiently in their homes. They really didn't think about energy because the cost of it was so low. And then as you can see in the film, and if you visit Ukraine, there's been very few building codes for a long time, so people live in extremely poor quality homes. So when you come to the Cold at Home website, when you watch the documentary film and take the time to read that feature article, you can see that we've made the connection between Katya's personal story and this negotiation that happened between the IMF and the government of Ukraine, and some of these policies that have been in place for a really long time. So her situation is not about her personally. She is experiencing that situation personally, but in reality her situation is about these much bigger, more complex issues that have been in place for a long time. One of the things that happens when you do these personal reporting is that it's very easy to fall into stereotypes. And it might not seem that unusual that an elderly woman in Ukraine is in energy poverty. But we want to make sure we're covering a range of stories. So now let's go to a mid-sized town in South Wales in the UK and meet Dawn, who is a single mom with 2 boys. And she's got a decent house and a decent job. So what is Dawn's story? So Dawn's story is also told in a 10-minute video, and it's very much about the fact that she recognizes she's not in energy poverty yet, but she's on the verge of it. And so she's trying to get herself and her sons to think about how they can change their energy behaviors. And part of the reason, the way she's encouraging her sons is to say, if we save this amount on energy, then we can take a summer holiday. If we don't change our energy habits, we're not going to be able to afford a holiday. So in a section of the website that's called Where Does Energy Poverty Exist?, we've built up stories about how it differs from country to country, looking at what is the economic situation, what are the energy policies, what are the housing policies, and all of those things. So we're mapping out why it's different from one context to another. Sometimes we also look at specific communities within a country, and I'm from Canada, so one of the communities that we looked at there was the First Nations community, where the rates of energy poverty are extremely, extremely high for completely different reasons than anybody else in Canada would be in energy poverty. And an important part of the personal stories that we do is to bring home the point that it's not just those people over there that are in energy poverty. It could actually be the person living next door to me. And we want everybody to feel like I might know somebody that's in this situation. So all of that content is really kind of about what causes energy poverty. The next part of our Inform and Explain content is really looking at, it's still focused on the personal parts of energy poverty, but here we're really starting to look at what are the impacts, the personal impacts of energy poverty. So we have a series of blogs about how being chronically cold affects the health and well-being of people. And the series really emphasizes that the impacts are very different for infants, children, adolescents, young adults, and of course the elderly. We also have content about how cold affects people with unusual diseases, such as sickle cell anemia, which tends to be within the immigrants, the community of immigrants from Africa, who may not have even known they had sickle cell until they come to a cold climate and have to deal with winters. I mentioned earlier that we try to reach 2 audiences. We want to reach the public, but we also want Cold at Home to be very, very interesting and valuable to people like yourselves. And so when we first started talking about this, we said, well, how are we going to do that? Because everybody talks in communications or journalism. Who's your audience? Don't make your audience too broad. And we think we've addressed that problem by what we have, a parallel blog structure. So for each of the blogs that we put up, there's a basics version that is 300 words. Anybody could read that and get 3 or 4 main points out of it. You can link on the in-depth version, which is what we're using to target you as an audience. So that version is more like 800 to 1,000 words. It is written by an energy expert, or a social expert, whoever is the appropriate expert on that. So that does have references, and it does have links to more studies, and that's the content where we're saying, if you, as a sociologist, want to help somebody who's in the policy sector understand what you're doing, they're never going to read your academic paper. But if we can help you make a journalistic article 800 words about your academic paper, then maybe we can reach those people and help you connect with each other. And part of the process of that, too, is us as journalists helping you figure out a really effective way to tell your story to an audience that's different than your peers. We also worked with EPOV, the EU Energy Poverty Observatory, to do this photo essay on energy poverty, looking at it not only in winter but in summer. So Exposed did a couple of important things. We went to a country where the policymakers would absolutely say there's no energy poverty in our country, that was Sweden. What we found there was people who live in the far north remote areas, which are actually super close to the power plants, have a lot of outages. And so they all spend a lot of money on backup systems, and they regularly have outages that last a couple of minutes or a couple of days or a couple of weeks. So they're in that situation where energy is available, but it's unreliable, and because it's unreliable, it becomes very unaffordable for them. The most extreme situation we came across there was a couple who are traditional reindeer herders, and they would go out for the whole summer with their reindeer, and they came back one year and their electricity had been off long enough that all of the meat from the previous year that was in their freezers was spoiled. So that was a really big economic hit for that family. And then we also did summer reporting in Hungary and also here in Spain. And of course, in Spain, what we were talking about is what many people have talked about today, the combination of an energy transition going on while electricity prices and gas prices were going up, and the economic crisis hit. So that was that story. In Hungary, it's a little bit more about Soviet-style buildings that have absolutely no shade on them, they have no insulation, nobody has air conditioning units. So as the summers pass there, it gets extremely hot, and there really isn't any way to get out of that situation. So then we like to take our content from the personal to the political or to the policy level. And we have a site, a part of the site called What Do Cold Homes Cost a Country? And we worked with the Buildings Research Enterprise Group in the UK with data that they have that's looking at what are the risks inside a house that end up bringing costs to the national healthcare system, the National Health Services. And so what we have here is 9 of the most common risks in a household: falling in the bathtub, or when you're getting out of the bathtub, falls on a level in your house so you just slip on the kitchen floor or something, fire, damp and mold, falls down the stairs, hot surfaces in the house, falls between levels, which is different than the stairs. It's just like if you have 2 stairs or something, excess cold, and collision, if people run into each other or you run into something in your house. So what we show on the left-hand side, or well, I guess right for you, is all of the costs that those household hazards bring to the National Health Service, which is £1.4 billion annually. And this is on the website. I can't show you this because we don't have access, but what we ask you to do is match up those risks with the bubble that associates what their actual costs are. And so what it comes out to is that really big yellow bubble in the middle is the excess coal bubble. And I don't think anybody on our site has guessed that correctly yet. So this is one of the ways that we make the content interactive and a little bit fun, but still very, very educational. Attached to that sort of fun interactive, then we take you down, again, there's a feature article below it, and we have some tables about, well, if your child if there's damp and mold in your home and your child gets asthma and goes to the hospital, what does that cost? It's about £250. If your elderly mother or grandmother is chronically cold and ends up having a heart attack or respiratory problems, goes to the hospital, that suddenly becomes £20,000 in national health care services. So I want you to keep that amount of £20,000 in your head for a minute, because we're going to come back to that in a minute. So one of the things that we think we do differently than a lot of media outlets is that we do a lot of solutions reporting. And in our first year, we really built up that, what are the causes, what are the impacts, and now we're really, really ready to focus on what are the solutions. And we do this again by highlighting technology, policy, social solutions, through feature articles, news briefs, fact sheets, editorials, infographics, and interactive elements. We find that the mainstream media is much more likely to say, here's a problem, somebody should do something about it. We want to say, here's a problem, and here's the hundreds of people who are doing something about it, and bring all of those hundreds of stories into one place where you can find each other, and where somebody living in energy poverty can go, wow, there really is a huge number of people trying to help me out. We also want to make sure that the people who, like I said before, the people who are working on energy poverty know who each other are. So I'm going to run you through some of the places that we've been able to get content and become more interactive or engage with more people. So we definitely want to interact with the research community. We did a podcast with Dr. Brenda Boardman, who you all, I'm sure, have heard of. And what I thought in the end was really wonderful about this podcast is anybody could listen to this and understand what Brenda is saying. You don't have to be somebody that is researching or doing social work, or friends of mine that have no idea what energy poverty is have listened to it and they've said, well, okay, now I get it, and I get why it's a problem. So one of the things we want to do is make researchers and all of the actors just seem like really real people that you could sit down and have a conversation with. We're also doing research, reporting on what policymakers are doing, and the government of Ireland is our most interesting story so far. In 2016, they launched the Warmth and Wellbeing Scheme, and we reported on that. So it's a pilot project between the Department of Energy and the Department of Health, and also the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland. And within this program, they want to do large-scale, deep retrofits on a number of homes in Dublin, so that they're essentially taking an entire community where many people might be living in energy poverty and saying, let's fix this whole community. But one of the things that's really important in this project is that if a physician has a patient who is chronically sick because of being chronically cold, the physician can prescribe a deep retrofit to that person's house. And this is where we come back to that 20,000 euros or 20,000 pounds that I mentioned with the NHS example. The physician can prescribe up to 20,000 euros of retrofits for a single home. So that means that home is always going to be efficient. It's going to have, they can put in new windows, a new boiler, new insulation, and it means that that person, whoever lives in that home, is never going to have another 20,000 euro hospital bill from being cold at home. So this is the last year of that pilot project, and we're actually hoping to work with those entities to do a lot of reporting about it, and we really hope that our next documentary film will be about how that pilot project has played out. Who else is doing stuff? We heard it earlier today, some of us heard from Clemence Hutin from the Right to Energy Coalition. This is a group of entities that are working at the EU policy level, very much making sure that EU directives have specific language about energy poverty, and not only may think about energy poverty, but should do things about energy poverty. So we're happy to be part of that group. We're also recently more connected with the energy efficiency side of the story through the IPEAC, which is the International Partnership for Energy Efficiency Cooperation, which is connected to the International Energy Agency. What's interesting about IPEAC is they have been asked by the G20 governments to recommend on behavior change in support of energy efficiency. So they're very interested in some of the work that we've been doing to say, how can we get people to think differently about energy? How can we get people to change their energy behaviors? I have people also work at, at the industry level and transport level and all of that, but they're very, very interested in saying, how can we get individual people to change their energy behaviors? Another organization that we've been working with is the Social Innovation Community, and this is a really great project sponsored by the Schneider Electric Foundation and also the Ashoka Foundation. And over the last, I think about 3 years, Ashoka and Schneider have supported 30 different social innovators who have viable business ideas about how to address energy poverty. And they give them some funding, but more importantly, they give them about 300 hours worth of mentorship to say, you have a good idea, we want you to learn how to turn that into a business idea or into a bigger project. How do you scale it up? A couple of really neat examples. One came up earlier today in Belgium. There's a group that's working with Bosch appliances to provide home appliance, high energy efficiency home appliances for very low rental costs. So you get a dishwasher, not a dishwasher, washer, dryer, stove, refrigerator. There's a fifth one. It might be a dishwasher. You rent those for 12 or 15 euros a month, which is not very much money. And at first when I thought about that, I was like, okay. And then I thought, if you are someone living in energy poverty, first of all, you're going to have whatever appliances your landlord supplied or whatever you can afford. They're going to be inefficient, and you might not even have a washer and dryer at home. If you have 3 kids, you're going to go to the laundromat 2 or 3 times a week, and you're going to spend more than 12 euros on each one, and plus you're going to have to lose the time that you spend at the laundromat. Bosch was also interested in this because they said, typically when our appliances get sold, we have no control about what happens at the end of their life cycle. And what Bosch is wanting to do is say, we maintain ownership of those. If something breaks down, we have to replace it or do the maintenance on it. But if the renter decides not to keep it, or when it comes to the end of its life cycle, we have to take it back and figure out what to do with it. And so they're looking at it as a learning experience and how they can do the life cycle management of their projects. So now let's come back to this empowering part of what we want to do. And there's really 2 elements that we have going on so far. One is on the Cold at Home site, we have something called Act Now. And we also do social media. And these both reflect our belief that it's time for everyone to get energy. And we see that meaning both it's time for people to have access to energy, and it's time for people to understand the energy that they're using. So the Act Now area has 3 sub-areas. One is Act for Yourself, and this is where we have energy saving tips that you can figure out things to do for your home, or where you can go to get help, given on where you are geographically. That part of the site is not very built up yet, but it's coming along. The other one is, how can you help others? If you're not living in energy poverty, but you'd like to help someone else, we have some content there. And then social media. Our idea is to take that, remember I said people spend 10 minutes a year thinking about energy. We want to make that 1 minute a day, at least. So we use Twitter and Instagram. Our Instagram account is really quite fun, Everyday Energy. We do this is more global. It's just not the unaffordable part. But we show pictures of what it's like to live in energy poverty. We show pictures of solutions to energy poverty. We also show pictures of our own interactions with energy from day to day. And we put our energy saving tips up there, and sometimes we put up energy facts that are just interesting. We call them NFacts to play along on our name. And just to give you one example, one is something that, there's 70 million kilometers of power lines in the world, and still 1/3 of the people don't have access to electricity. So that's the kind of fun little thing that we like to put out there, just so that people think about energy once a day. And then just a quick assessment of what we've done on Cold at Home so far, what we feel as successes and challenges. One of the successes is we're here and talking to a new audience today, so that's great, and thank you again for the invitation. As I said, we've been invited to join a number of different organizations, partly because the quality of our content is very attractive to people, and the recognition that we can help people tell their stories better. Our first documentary film from Ukraine won first prize in the Danish Press Agency, and we have been recognized as a very unique communications tool that does manage to attract diverse audiences. And we also get regular offers to contribute content, and we would love to hear from anybody here that would like to add content to ENACT. We do have a limited budget at the moment, so we're working on securing long-term stable funding and also finding more ways to build up our audience. We know we have great content, we just need more people to come to it. One of the nice successes that I had recently was an email from somebody saying, oh, I went to your site to watch one of your documentary films, and I stayed for 2 hours. And I thought, you know what? That's somebody who came only for the creative content, and they walked away knowing this whole big complex story in a way that they probably would have never sat down and read a book or a report for 2 hours. But if we let people find their own ways through interesting, engaging content, then they'll just spend a couple of hours at it.